In 2016, you published the book Posada, Offerings of Witness and Refuge. It's a book of remembering. There's a lot of memory in the book. There is your own memory, the memory of your family, the memory of your culture. The book is dedicated to your grandmother, so that's an example. I would like to know, how did you collect or how did you process all these memories?
I think first what had to happen was I had to understand that there was, value in those. I think when I first started out as a writer, one of the first poems I wrote, I was at Pasadena City College, and I wrote this poem called Chorizo Mornings. And it was about all the noise my mom would make in the mornings and how you're just trying to sleep and she's banging pots and then you can smell the chorizo and you can hear the chihuahuas and you can hear the parakeets and all these things. I lost that poem. I need to rewrite it or something because I love it. I think about it. But so I use that to get into grad school. But then, you get to grad school and you're like, well, nobody's going to care about my family. And I have to be smarter than that or more important than that. And so there was this pressure. And that's what caused me to go out into the desert, which is also in the book.
Yes.
And I did that. And then what happened was a poet read the work and was like, okay, that's great, but I don't know why this person would do that. I don't know why they would go out into the desert and put themselves in danger. Who is that person? Well, me, because this is my family and this is what I've known my whole life. And so then I was like, oh, I should be telling these stories. I should be sharing them.
Was your family a big storytelling family? Did you have memories of people telling stories about everything, everyday life or the past?
My grandfather was infamous for telling tall tales, and so there was always a lot of laughter and a lot of joy around that, people retelling his stories. And so there was that. And then my father always really liked to share what his life was like as a child. I just remember there was he was always the person taking me to school or dropping me off. And there was a lot of times in the car. And then he would just randomly say well, back in my hometown of Teocatiche, when the full moon was out, that's when we would play all night because we didn't have electricity.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay. The hills of East LA are home. I remembered something. I remembered we used to go to a hill in LA to cut nopales with your grandmother and your tia Pepa. My aunt called me in the middle of the day not so long ago with these pieces of family history. Do you remember what hill? I asked, half being polite and half curious to dig for more. No, but your dad used to drive us. Maybe he knows. We are quiet on the line. I'm sitting on my bed in Solano Canyon, watching the neighborhood below my window move slow in the crack of green hills. Anything else? I ask. No, I remembered, and I guess I wanted you to know. She's proud I write poems and like to listen to old stories. The hills rise over the houses and traffic of the city like memories gently rising from my aunt's mind as she sits in a one-bedroom condo in Mesa, Arizona. She doesn't live in LA anymore, but the city doesn't leave her. The flat grid of her new residence makes her dreamy for hills and cactus pads like hearts. And for a brother who drove sisters, aunt, and mother to Montecito Heights on Sunday afternoons so they could have something like home for dinner.
The other element that I think is evident in Posada is of course, the sense of place. You were born in San Gabriel, is that right? And then your family was in Boyle Heights. And then you wrote this book living in Solano Canyon. And also in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that you went to the desert. Mm-hmm. So this idea of the place and also place connected to history and to memory. And also in the beginning of the book, you say is dedicated, I think, to your grandmother, which is memory, but you also say she was my Los Angeles and my safe place. I like that, the idea of the background and also the place at the same time. The book has 4 sections, mm-hmm. and the last 2 sections are based, I believe, on when you were talking before about your experience in the desert. You work as a volunteer for the organization No More Deaths.
So what No More Deaths does is they go out into the desert and they put out water for people crossing in the Sonoran Desert, because dehydration is the #1 way people die crossing into the country. They do other work as well. They do search and recovery, search and rescue. On the border, they help receive people to help them get their belongings back. They do a lot of different programs. So this is one of them. The first day when we're driving down a dirt road, no streets, no nothing, and we're talking about, okay, Border Patrol comes up to us, what are you going to do? Are you going to show your ID or are you not going to show your ID? What's our plan? And I'm like, I did not know what I was getting myself into.
Okay.
Yeah. You mentioned place.
Mm-hmm.
I call myself an experiential poet. Like, I can't really understand something unless I'm in it and living it. And that very much has to do with place. Like, I have to walk the place and see it to understand it. And so my goal when I went was like, everyone talks about the border, right? This was in 2009. So, but still, it was always talked about. Everyone always talks about the border, but it's not something you can really understand. So I wanted to go there and see it for myself and then write about that experience.
Yeah. And it becomes very physical, because that happens when I read Posada, the desert becomes very physical.
Yeah.
Like the impact in the body, in the mind, and also, of course, all the political implications with the border, so it has all the layers.
Yeah, so I was journaling every night. I was drawing. I mean, I'm terrible. These drawings are not good. But like plants, I was really focused on like plants and the names of plants and the way they look. Again, journaling every night, everything that happened. I was writing everything down because I had the intent to write about it later.
Why don't you talk a little bit about section 3 and read a little sample from that section?
The third section is called Things to Know for Compañeros, a No More Deaths volunteer guide. And this was based off of that feeling I was sharing before, where I'm like in the truck and we're going down the dirt road and they're saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to show your ID? And that fish out of water feeling and like, how did I get here? So this poem is based on that. When you volunteer with the organization, you get into Tucson, and the first couple of days is just training, like know your rights training, history of the land training, all the presidents and the different things they did over the years that have caused the border to be this way. But then there's also, first aid. And then you get out to the desert and then it's like, okay, well, if you see a tarantula, do this. And if you see lightning, do that. And it's like, oh my God, everything's going to kill me. And like, I'm just trying to like take in all this information so I don't die. And so that's this first poem. It's kind of like playing with all that information. And I wanted to make, a volunteer guide. And in my mind, what I thought would be so cool is if you could like tear it out and put it in your pocket.
Okay, so it would be like a volunteer guide as a poem.
Yes.
And a poem as a volunteer guide.
Yeah. So this is Things to Know for Compañeros. Did you know? A baby's rattlesnake's venom is more lethal because it knows no control. Woolly mammoth tarantulas inch across the road at dusk, not down it. Why did the tarantula cross the road? To eat the chicken. So that's how it starts. And like, that's something somebody told me. Oh, have you noticed the tarantulas do this? And I'm like, no, I don't look at tarantulas. And then further in the poem, and then every section, there's these little sections and everyone starts with, did you know, did you know? And it's things that I was watching, things that I was being told, and just my like impressions of being a volunteer. And then it goes to, did you know 1 gallon of water weighs 8.35 pounds? To stay hydrated, a person should drink 1 to 2 gallons a day. Migrants carry a single oil black gallon in calloused hands for a 3 or more day trip. Why is it black? So as not to glow. Did you know migrants are hurried over trails at night and without light? Their blisters are caused by continuous friction, muscle cramping by dehydration, vomiting by drinking bacteria-ridden cow pond water, and those who move too slow are left behind. Did you know to say I could care less is to say it is possible to care more? The careless weed is called bledo in Spanish. In Guatemala, bledo is boiled, drained, and chopped with onions, tomatoes, and cilantro. It grows wild in the desert, and if necessary, can be eaten raw. And then it continues on a few more sections.
What I really like about this poem is the specificity, because as you said, it's different to think of a border or a desert as an abstract concept. But then when you say the the containers they carry, they are black, so they don't reflect. Things like that, like, the specificity of the information. And it's interesting how something that is very descriptive, but it has, at the same time, and it's sad, there's a level of, tragedy, but there's a lyrical element in the language at the same time.
Yeah, I think I wanted to, so details like that nobody would know unless you were there, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to share, things like that. But I think the most important thing I was trying to do is just find some connection with the people I was out there volunteering to help. I was trying to find, I wanted to show that we're all connected.
Yeah.
And then the name of this book, it was actually called Safe Places at first. And I was like, oh, that's awful. And last minute I changed it to Posada, which is a poem within the book. And that was because, Posada is a Mexican pageant at Christmas. Mm-hmm. And someone dresses up as Joseph, someone dresses up as Mary, and they go around the town and they're knocking on doors trying to find a safe place to call home. Yeah. And there's this pageant and songs and all this. And so I thought, that's a good metaphor for it. But also what I found through writing this book was everyone just wants a home. And everyone just wants to find a safe place to call home. And that's how we're all the same. And I'm no different than them and vice versa. And then also it was about then it also became my search for what would my home look like as an adult with my own family,
Yeah. Something else that is evident in these last two sections of the book is the value of a missing person, that not everybody who is missing is not perceived in the same way by society. And we don't think about that. And there's one of your poems, I think is called Search and Recovery, explores that difference.
Search and recovery. Volunteers will not be combing the woods in single file at the edge of a peach town. Police will not be dragging the lake. Neighbors will not be questioned, nor family members interviewed. No pencil sketches will be drawn, no time-stamped videos aired. White candles will not be lit at midnight. No posters will be made, no stories printed. Regularly scheduled programming will not be interrupted. This will not stop two women from scaling the Atascosa Mountains like specks of dust. The wind and scrape of rocks beneath their feet will be the only noise that joins their search for a young man shot by his coyote and discarded by a wash with cement blocks and black kites cut loose from the sky, or maybe black tires stripped from a truck. It will be futile, but they will exhaust every unreliable detail until landmarks turn hot and hazy. They will hike with supplies slung over backs, extra water, socks, electrolyte pills, a couple of apples, peanut butter. At sunset, they will build camp beneath a pink sky, close eyes with last light, open with first, and start again. In the day, they will search for what remains. In the night, they will fear what remains might look like. Both will stay silent, too ashamed to say one hope aloud. If we cross a bundle tomorrow, please let it be branches.
Let's talk about your name for a moment. In this anthology, Imaniman, you have an essay about, if we could call it, the complexity of your name. And there's this episode I think you were about to read in a poetry reading, and somebody was introducing you and she couldn't pronounce your name. But then, and this is the moment where I had to read the sentence a couple of times, because you say something like, but here's the thing, even I didn't know how to say my own name. So could you expand this a little bit?
When you have a name like Xochitl, you spend your whole school life, from every day on the first day of school, the teacher goes to the list and is like, and I would just go, it's Xochitl. I'm right here, Xochitl. And I would always say Xochitl, no accent. So my name is Xochitl. It's Xochitl, so cheesy. It's so easy. You get kind of goofy, just to make it, just to make the awkwardness go away.
Okay.
And so then, then I became an adult, and then I became an artist and a poet. And so I was trying to honor my name more. So, and then it's who is this Xochitl when my name is Xochitl or Xochitl? And then it's like, well, what are the differences in the sounds mean? And then you add Julisa, which my full name, I have 2 first names. I think my parents just couldn't decide who got to choose. So my father picked Xochitl, my mom picked Julisa. So I have these 2 first names, which makes it even more difficult. So then I kind of got, what it talks about in that part is like, I kind of got to, okay, my name is Xochitl-Julisa. And I introduce myself, hi, I'm Xochitl-Julisa. I'm now used to when I go to a reading and they introduce me and they get my name wrong, I go up to the mic and go, hello, I'm Xochitl-Julisa Bermejo. Like, I had to practice that. But then the part that got me stuck was the Bermejo. Because I've spent my whole life saying Bermejo.
Okay.
Because that's how I heard it. I mean, inside my house, we were speaking Spanish. People always say, oh, you have a nice accent. I was like, well, I grew up with that. Like, that's how words sounded in my house. But you go outside at school or the doctor, it's Bermejo. Bermejo, hi, I'm Bermejo, you know. So I got to Xochitl-Julisa Bermejo? I don't, so it was confusing. And it took a while to practice saying all 3 together with the same accent.
So that links the conversation to the presence of other languages in your work, because one of the poems in Posada is, it has a bilingual format, it's in Spanish, it's in English, and also you use some Spanish words through the text. How is the relationship with the Spanish or with the Spanglish in your writing?
You're talking about the title poem, Posada.
Yeah, Posada. It has like two versions.
So
the Spanish version and the English version. Posada. La Posada de Los Ángeles is in Spanish, and then Posada is in English. It's at the end of part 1.
Oh, Ode to Pan Dulce. So those 2 poems to me. So Ode to Pan Dulce to me has a lot of Spanglish and it weaves in and out, and it's a poem about remembrance of my family members, my grandfather, my grandmother. And to me, that represents most how Spanish is in my mind and my like understanding. Like it weaves in and out. If my father says something to me in Spanish, gives me a command, I just do it. I don't go, huh? You know, what was that? You know, it's like, oh yeah, okay. And I just move along with my day. It doesn't stop me, but it's also not with me all the time. It's also like not always graspable. Like it's there floating around. So Ode to Pan Dulce, I feel I'm trying to show that like the language is there, but it floats around and moves around.
Do you mind reading it?
Oh, sure. Ode to Pan Dulce. When I bathe you in the aguas termales of my coffee and you happily soak in the heat and steam, what more can I do but place you on my tongue and recibirte como un sacrament? Your warmth radiates from my mouth, lighting the esquinas oscuras of my mind, where I find my tata bien sentada on his corner stool in the little pistachio kitchen in Boyle Heights. Ojos brillantes, sugar dusting white stubble, he laughs. Here his sonrisa grows and cancer never shrivels lips. Panecito mío, lightweight and delicate in my palm, pájaro about to fly. I want to save you in tissue like chile picked from the yard already wrinkling, like unraveling yarn end of sueños that tangle on wake. I throw myself into an embrace with a long dead friend. I notice his favorite red jacket and think, where have you been? This is how you are, Panecito, a perfect holy circle filling my hungry soul with lost loves that now and again regresan. You are the warm silence that filled the air between Grandma leyendo oraciones and me reading poems. You are Tata's booming laugh. You are the Español swimming in my mind. You are one single moment, a bite.
You started the organization Women Who Submit, and with 2 other writers, is that correct? Could you talk about the origin of the organization and what you do?
So in 2011, the co-founders, Alice Dixon and Ashaki Jackson, they got together to create this organization. What happened was there's another organization called VITA, Women in Literary Arts. And in 2009, they started counting how many women were published in top-tier journals and comparing that to how many men were published. And so they were just opening up, you know, the Paris Review and the New Yorker, and they were counting names, and they put out a report of what they found. They were also looking at how many books by women were being reviewed compared to how many books by men were being reviewed. And that report showed a disparity. And so Alice Dixon was working with them, and she thought about what she could do. They started asking editors, well, why are these numbers like this? Why aren't you publishing women? The editors almost always came back with, well, women don't submit as often. And women don't resubmit as aggressively. The message has always been if a male writer gets a rejection, he's automatically already sent a new one. Okay, well, you'll probably like this one. Here you go, and women will sit on it. Well, did they really mean it? I'm sure, maybe I'll send it again later, maybe when I'm ready, and then they wait, and then, the editor changes or whatever. So that was the story that was coming back. That was the message. And Alice Dixon had this idea of, well, what if we create a co-working space? We all come together in a space with our computers, with our resources, with our work, and we help each other submit together.
How did you know this other?
Right. So they were working in a co-working space in Santa Monica, and Alice Dixon was talking to Shaki about it. She was like, yeah, let's make that happen. Shaki and I knew each other in the LA writing scene, and I was just out of a graduate program, so she thought, oh, Xochitl knows people. She's newly out. She knows a lot of writers in the area. Let's see if she can help us.
Okay.
And so they invited me in. And then we made the first submission party was at my parents' house in 2011 in the summer. I think there was like 6 writers. And we had journals, because every journal says, oh, make sure to read our journal before you submit to us. That can be very expensive. So we all brought journals that we had so that people could look through them and get some sense of the journal. And those are practices we still do today.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how many people are in the organization?
Once you come to a meeting, we claim you. So over the last 11 years, we have over 300 members in LA. And then we have 20 to 30 chapters nationwide.
Oh, wow.
We have a European chapter that started in 2021. And they're out of Paris, I believe. We have a Mexico-Canada chapter. Yeah.
The first anthology is called Accolades, is that right? So this is Accolades, and then the second one is called again? Gathering.
This anthology, Accolades, it was like a report card. It was like, we only were publishing people who got published. So like, look, we're getting published, and we're getting published in all these journals, and look at all the editors that like our work, and we're doing it. And that was like our proof.
This is from 2020.
That's 2020. And then in 2021, experiencing the pandemic, we thought, well, let's celebrate that we're still doing this. We're still gathering. We're still getting together. We're still helping each other, even though all of these insanity is happening. So that was the next one.
Do you want to talk about your projects? Some people like to talk about projects, or some people don't.
Sure, I can talk about my next collection. It's a collection of love poems. Again, finding value, right? I think some of the first poems I ever wrote were love poems. I've always been this like moony girl. I've always had unrequited love, and I've always written about that. And again, there's a lot of, it's hard to find value in that. But I was reading about love by Bell Hooks, and she addresses that, right? It's like, why are we more likely to read a book from a man about love than a book from a woman? And women should feel that their point of view is important. And go ahead and write that love poem, that thing about love. Do it. I mean, that's what all her work is about, really, right? But I was reading about love when I was like, yeah, I am going to do it. And it's also very much, in line with Posada, because in this new collection, I got to go to Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. I had a poetry fellowship with the National Park Arts Foundation and Gettysburg, and also the Poetry Foundation. They sent me out there for a month. I didn't know
again.
Yeah, and again, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Like, I thought, I have a checklist of things I want to do before I die, right? Like, I want to be a poet laureate. One of the things is I want to write at a national park. Like, but I was thinking Yosemite.
Okay.
This was having a environment. I'm like, I would love to write poems in Yosemite. And then this came across my desk at a Women Who Submit meeting. Probably somebody said, hey, did you see this? And I was like, oh, I can write at a national park. I've always wanted to do that. I didn't realize there's a difference between natural parks and historical parks. So I went out to this Civil War site in 2017. So this is like just when, former president was ramping up. This is when there was these marches with the guys with their light torches.
Yeah.
This is when I went out to a Civil War site that has over 1,100 monuments just in this one space.
Wow.
And then me as a Chicana, sola, there in this little farmhouse that was probably haunted by ghosts. There were 2 soldiers that had died in the basement of this house, and that's like part of the house's story. And so I was very frightened about ghosts, and I was constantly thinking that I was being watched. I would keep all the lights on. I would keep I would have my computer on, and I'd have something playing like on my pillow next to my head because I didn't want to hear anything. As soon as the sun came up, I would run out and be like, oh my God. And then I was like, maybe I need to change this. This is like a week of this. I have to change something. And I decided, well, what if I try to talk to the ghosts?
Okay.
So I went out to a place called the Peach Orchard, which is one of the famous battle sites. So Gettysburg had a 3-day battle. Every single place where something happened, some skirmish happened over those 3 days is marked and has monuments. And so one of those places is called the Peach Orchard, and there's still peaches there. And I went out there with, at sunset in my notebook and a couple of crystals. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to talk to the ghosts and maybe they'll leave me alone. So that's what this poem is. And this was originally published at Exposition Review. Ghost interview with a soldier in the Peach Orchard, after Ghost Lines Collective. Dried peach pits litter the ground, reminding me of bones. Are your bones below the soil? Is this why you care for fields dressed in morning fog, snagging on fences? How do you want to be remembered? If you could write anything on one of these monuments flanking the orchard, what would you write? Have you ever pledged allegiance to a flag? Any flag? Have you ever loved a flag like your mother's arms? Speaking of your mother's arms, how did they smell when tucked tight below your nose? Like fresh baked loaves, or maybe stone? I want a better simile, but I need you to tell me. If you could go back, what would you say to your father? What would you teach your daughter? I still hope to have a child, so consider this advice. In your final moments, whom did you think of? Did you write this someone love letters home with sign-offs like, I wait to hold you and forever yours? I sit below a tree alone at twilight because I'm always alone and afraid. Are you here with me? Is that you rustling the branches? I tell you, I'm done being afraid. Do you hate war? Did you ever love war? Am I totally off, and is war like God, unknown, all around, a mystery too big to understand? I want to believe in love like some believe in God. Will you help me? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm beautiful? Would you date me? Don't answer that. What can I say? I talk too much when I'm anxious. Please tell me a question exists that will help us both let go.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.